Hello there, welcome back. This is Sheepishly here once again, and today I have my build guide for the Trickster Splitting Steel character. I finally got around to do my path of building as well as record quite a lot of content for you guys, going through each tiny little bits and pieces of the build, the gears, the mods we're looking for, the trees, the gems, the decisions we made along the way, as well as a bit of the flavors I've tried to put onto this build. Um, it is by far the best build I've played in Path of Exile history, and I've played a lot of builds. I started in Talisman, played Strength Stacker with Original Sing. I've played Mana Stacker, which is Connor's build with Mana Forge Arrows. I've played a lot of good builds over the years, and this was definitely one of the better ones. The amount of kind of like speed, damage, tankiness, and just kind of like how comfortable it is to play. There's not too many buttons, you don't have to worry about things. You can just go around killing things. It's fantastic. I love it. Well, anyways, let's get into it. Okay. Um, so for the build guide, we're gonna split up into a bunch of sections. For the first section is build a build overview, and then later on we're gonna go through some of the gear choices, gems, passive tree, and all that good stuff. Onto the first bit, pros and cons. I think let's go through the cons. There's not many bad bits about this build. It's just very expensive at the top end. Um, the a lot of the mods are set in stone. I think maybe the way I think about this is that the build is so optimized, you kind of have to go for the best options if you want to optimize at the top end. It's also an in-stacker build at the top end, so things do get a bit expensive there, but yeah. It is still a very good build though, even though it's very expensive. Not as fast as bow builds, to be honest, not many builds are. But I think maybe the better comparison is that we're not as fast as our cousin, which is Lightning Strike. It's what it is. Splitting Steel is just mechanically an inferior clearance skill compared to Lightning Strike, but we're a much better bosser, so there's a bit of trade-off there. Also, you're a meta abuser if you play this build. Just saying. The pros, so many of them. One of the tankiest builds ever. It is simply insane how much of the T17 volatiles, how much of the Vodo quad ghosted feared I can tank. You pretty much never die unless you're trying to die. So again, it's one of the highest damage builds. Is it the highest damage build? No. In fact, it's probably nowhere near some of the highest damage builds. Um, but I think for the amount of tankiness in terms of trade-off, we do pretty well for ourselves, right? We don't have billions of damage, right? We're not a mana stacker. Um, we're not an original Sing strength stacker. We don't have those level of damages. But in terms of damage scaling, it's very efficient scaling. And as you saw in the opening clips, we do some very decent damages to the end game content. I don't think you need to do any more damage than we already do, unless you're like deep delving for everything else, including ghosted Rogue Exile farm on T17. This build does that very, very well. You're also actually pretty fast and have decent coverage from mapping. Again, Lightning Strike is superior, but Lightning Strike is superior to everything else in the game anyways. With an Awakened Fork, maybe that's I should call that out. With an Awakened Fork, we actually get very nice speed and coverage while clearing, so it feels pretty good. And lastly, I like to play these builds with infinite scaling, but also good, decent budget options. I swapped this build when I had 9k ES, now I have 27k. Every little upgrades I get alongside the journey makes me want to play the build a little bit more. It kind of just feels good when you have a build that you can grow with throughout the length of a league. So yeah, it's a very good build. I think, and honestly, I'm not just saying that because I'm making a build guide about it. I can guarantee you, GGG will be nerfing this build. Probably something to do with Trickster, maybe some interaction with kind of like the body armor or the scaling of our damage with Ephemeral Edge, but something will be nerfed because it's just too efficient at the moment, right? You don't have to make any conscious decisions because the optimal path forward has already been laid out for you. And I think normally at this point, especially if the build's popular, which it is, GG tends to nerf the archetype. So I don't think it's gonna survive to 3.26. So if you have one build left in you this league and you want to play something that's strong or you've never tried Trickster before, now's the time to try it before GG absolutely nuke this class once again into the gutters. Moving on, just to go through some of the key mechanics before we jump into gear. This is what I'm talking about, how efficient the build is how we scale energy shield, and then by scaling energy shield, we're scaling our defense and damage. And what enables that is this item called Ephemeral Edge. Not too long ago, this is like a Aurabot only item because they see this line here, which is 50% increase max energy shield. They're like, man, that's pretty good defensive item that lets me shield charge around. Let's do that for Aurabots. But nowadays, we look at the last line. Attacks with this weapon have added maximum lightning damage equal to 20%. 20% of your maximum energy shield. And hey, we get up to like 20,000 energy shield pretty easily, right? That is a crazy amount of maximum energy shield, of maximum added lightning damage we're getting. And this is the whole thing that enables our build, right? Everything else with int stacking, which we can see on the right hand side, with picking Trickster, scaling with your body armor, with Escape Artist, and the new buff, the Necrotic armor. It all is to facilitate this conversion of maximum energy shield into maximum lightning damage. This mod, I think, might be the one that gets nerfed. It's a bit too good in terms of scaling. And especially with POE, it's one of those games that if you can scale one thing, right, which in this case is ES, but it scales both offense and defense, like efficiency is all that matters in the end game because you can only get 6 mods on your gear. Okay, maybe implicits and other stuff, but you know what I mean, right? You have limited amount of mods you can get, so it's all about efficiency of those mods and how the mods work together to create multiplicative or maybe even exponential impacts onto your build, and this is exactly what this archetype does. You scale Escape Artist, you scale your Evasion and ES for defensive layers, you stack some intelligence, you convert that into more energy shield, and you convert all of those energy shield into maximum lightning damage. It is bonkers how efficient this build is. Absolutely fantastic. I'm just kind of comparing a bit into the buff to the chest armor, which is the most important piece for Tricksters in 3.25. On the right hand side, we have a 3.24, right? Necropolis armor. This is pulled from the highest energy shield character, Trickster, in 3.24, which is Necropolis. As you can imagine, Necropolis, you just make, T1, all T1 mod items for free. Yeah? Look at what they had back then. 2.5k ES, 550 energy shield. Look at what we have this time around. This is your 3.25. Yeah? I have 3.6k ES, almost 1.1k more, and almost 200 energy shield more than this item there. Right? That's a humongous improvement in terms of how much you get. And look at this. We have the Grasping Mail mod on this item as well. Is this the best example I could have given? Probably not. There may be more insane chests from last league, but my point stands, right? With the way they've buffed how quality is now multiplicative, with the introduction of the Necrotic armor, with the reintroduction of Recombobulators to coming to grab the Grasping Mail mod, the vectors of scaling for your body armor has just increased tremendously. And this all gets multiplied into the build via the Trickster Ascendancy. So, again, I think it's just kind of like the perfect storm coming together to make Trickster one of the most broken classes this league, and to make this build one of the most broken builds this league, which is why I'm 100% convinced that GGG's gonna nerf it next league. Okay, the last one is to do a bit of mechanic with splitting steel. So I think if you're watching this, you already know, so I don't want to go too much into it. But really, what's really good about splitting steel, it's the interaction with Nimis. Yeah. So if you read what splitting steel does, it splits outwards, right? Splits on impact or at the target location, and then it splits again, and then when the splits projectile explode at the end of their flight. Ooh, that's not a good highlight. Let me get rid of that. Splits explode at the end of their flight. That's the part that can shotgun. Right? Let me be clear, this is a shotgunning ability. Shotgunning is one of the most broken mechanics in POE. GGG tries to remove them wherever they can, right? But splitting steel can shotgun. But the issue, and let's always jump over into the classic paint, because for some reason POE players likes paint. The way it works, you fire one projectile, hit something, right? And then it's gonna split. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Say that, right? And then each of the splits will do a little explosion at the end. Okay, you ask me how does that shotgun? They're very far away, the mob is there, I am like here. How do these shotgun, right? Well, it shotguns because of Nimis. Nimis makes each of these return to you, right? So all of these little pieces is going to return back to you, and when they return to you, they do a little explosion, like an AoE explosion around you, and those AoE explosions can shotgun. Yeah. And now here you're still wondering, well, this doesn't look very strong. Well, you'll be right, to be completely honest with you. And this is why when people give advice for how to play this build, they'll go, hey, you gotta stand on top of the enemy, right? So imagine this is the enemy you're trying to hit, right? Let's add some horns because this is a bad guy. What you want to do is that you want to stand right next to him. Well, I should probably chose a different color there. Green for you because you are friendly. You stand right on top of him, and you fire, bam, primary projectile. Now, where does the secondary projectiles go? They go outwards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Don't know how many you get. And then Nimis makes them all come back towards the bad guy with the horns in the middle. Okay, this is getting very confusing, but yeah. And they all hit him at the same time. And splitting steel with Nimis is different to a lot of the other shotguns. You'll hear about other shotgunning where, like maybe you're familiar with explosive concoction or poisonous concoction, where you don't have 100% shotgunning, you shotgun for like 80% of it. Every single one of these return projectiles will shotgun. Okay, so when we have this, each time you have fire, every single one of them will. It's been well tested. This is why these two items go so nicely together. And if you don't have Nimis, yeah, it's a very expensive item. If you don't have Nimis, don't play this build. Right? If you have Nimis, go play Lightning Strike. You're gonna feel way better on Lightning Strike. Without Nimis, Splitting Steel is not a build. So I just want to make that clear. If you have Mage Blood, you have a lot of the other gears, but you don't have Nimis, play Lightning Strike, farm out a bit more, and then transition over to Splitting Steel. Cool. Let's go into the gears. Okay, let's now go through the gear that we have. I have a bunch of slides just because it's easier to lay out the information this way, but let me first just go through how to read the slide because all of them will be in the same format. So on the top left, we have what gear we're going to be talking about, which for this case is Ephemeral Edge, our weapon. I normally have a little blurb here to explain what's the key focus of this item slot, which for Ephemeral Edge, it is to enable how we scale damage based on our energy shield. Right, this is because of this line right here. Let me put an arrow to it. Attacks with this weapon have added maximum lightning damage equal to 20% of max energy shield. As you can imagine, as we get to 20,000 energy shield, you get a tremendous amount of maximum lightning damage, and this is in fact how we scale the vast majority of all of our damages. On the top right hand side, if there's available, I will normally have a link to my crafting video, or in this case a gambling video of how this gear is made. For this one, I will share the slides afterwards in the YouTube descriptions. You can click into it and watch the videos as you like. Now the important part is here. I've got some commentary here which is around one must-haves. So these are actually non-negotiable things. You're gonna see that it's not all the mods is tagged as non-negotiable. Say for instance Ephemeral Edge, the only thing you really need to have is Resolute Technique, which we got here. Yep. And then you also have a bunch of aspirational mods down below. Say Harvest Attack Speed Enchant, Onslaught Kill, which is what we have. Attack Speed, which is obviously the best one, but it's very expensive. And then of course a Maxi Estro will be nice as well. So these are aspirational mods. Sometimes I manage to get them on my gear, sometimes I couldn't. It's something for you to, aspire towards, not something that's necessary. Okay? And then obviously here we have a picture of the gear, and then we have, what I'm currently running. You can check my POE as well. This is taken as a screenshot from them. So that's how you're gonna read this section. So to go into it, Ephemeral Edge, really pretty much what we went through. I find that it is really good to have at least the Harvest attack speed mod on the the attack speed per 8% quality, simply because this is a very slow attacking weapon at only 1.33. Yeah. But besides that, it is what it is. You buy a Resolute Technique one, you're kind of done. Very important. We need this item before we can play this build, so definitely get this. Okay, moving on. For our belt, we want Mage Blood. There's no really second option here because this is how we can get to 9% packed res, solve a bunch of our resistances. It's just, you can't make the build without it. What are the must-haves for Flasks? And you probably want to get your attribute percentage up using Intrinsic Catalyst. It's pretty cheap. Nothing more to be said there. It's good to have high resistance rolls, especially fire. Dex roll is good. You can get more tattoosing, but you don't need a perfect dex roll. We're not really strapped for dex. But you really, if you want a percentage int implicit corrupt, that's about 2 mirrors. So if you have money to splash, go for something like a 7% or 6%. It's pretty good. Moving on to Nimis. Nimis is very important, right? So I have here that Splitting Steel does no damage without this, and that is 100% true. If you don't have Nimis, I will play the Lightning Strike variant actually. So yeah, you just gotta buy this item. In terms of rolls, nothing really matters. The key one is just this projectile return to you mod, which all Nimis comes with. You don't really need any crazy corruptions. But if you are looking for improvements, getting something like a high projectile damage roll is good. High dex roll is nice. If you want a good int implicit, 3 mirrors, good luck with that. It's definitely very aspirational. So this one is optional. Moving on to the next one, Anathemas. I consider this to be a critical part of the build. I know some people don't like it, but to me the amount of power this ring offers, it's quite silly to not have it. And the reason is because of this line. Your curse limit is equal to your maximum power charge. This enables the quad curse setup during our burst window, and I think comes out to be something like a double damage essentially when you press that focus button that people seem to hate to press. If you think about Path of Exile in the very end game, when you're doing hundreds of millions of damage, the bosses are gonna melt within a couple of seconds, right? So all you need to do is make sure your burst DPS is sufficient to burst any boss down, and then you're gonna melt through anything in this game. This is also how we're able to burst down the Uber Exarch before he faces. So it is a crazy item. I would definitely get this one. You can go without it if you just really hate to press the focus button, but trust me, it's gonna make your play super enjoyable. When you get to the boss, you just absolutely melted within a couple of seconds. all you gotta do is press one button, and that button's insta-cast anyways. So, um, yeah, I don't see it as a clunky. Um, yeah, yeah, I don't see focus as a clunky mechanic. It's pretty good. In terms of aspirational, having a max intro is gonna be good. Having a good implicit, well, this time around it's only 80 divines, so I would suggest for you to get it. You can see that I have both of them right here. It costed me about 50 divines when I got this. It's just a small bit of min maxing, you don't need it. Having the ring itself is perfectly sufficient by itself. Now, moving on to the crafted item section. So the first one up is body armor. A good necrotic armor is the essence of a good trickster build. So here we have Torment Keep, which is a mirror tier chest that we've managed to craft ourselves. I've linked the YouTube video to the top right. You guys can have a look at how we crafted this one. What are the must-haves then? So here is where I gotta explain again for how I wrote out these notes. Must-haves are something that you cannot really play the build without. So you need max spell suppress because we actually need 22% to perfectly spell suppress cap. Again, I wouldn't go without it. 2% max res, lightning res is because my version of the build requires this to hit 90% all maximum res, so you kinda need it. The less damage taken per intelligence, yeah, for an int stacking build, such as the one I'm running, you definitely need it. You can also technically take chaos damage converted, physical damage converted to chaos damage. Both are viable, but I think obviously the less damage per int is more optimal. Aspirational wise, this entire item is pretty aspirational. You can have a look at the stats here. 30% quality, 12% increase explicit defense mods. You have perfect implicits, max spell suppress, T1 int, and then you have perfect prefixes everywhere. So, and more importantly, you have the 56% increased global defenses, and that is a breach mod, which means that it only occurs on grasping males. That was the hard part about crafting this chest, is how do we move that 56% increased global defenses over to your body armor. And the reason why this mod is so efficient is that global defenses includes both energy shield and evasion, and Trickster scales both of these. So it is the pinnacle, I would say, of necrotic armors for Tricksters, especially for this league. It doesn't get much better than this. And when I say that this is the most important crafted piece of gear you can make, I do mean that. The amount of damage, the amount of survivability this item gives you is unparalleled. Do not skimp on your body armor. With that being said, I've got a budget version. Again, I've linked in the top right a video on how to craft this. Oblivion Keep, it's the small brother of Torment Keep, which is the mirror tier one. This one, don't get me wrong, is still very, very good, right? But what we're missing, the key one here, is the Breach Global Defense mod. This is something that is very hard to get, right? You're not gonna see this around except for mirror tier items, but it is not that big an increase to the item. It's gonna increase your energy shield by maybe 2,000-ish, right? So when you have 20,000, it's sizable, but it's not like build breaking. What I would focus on here is making sure that, again, your max spell suppress, you have the right implicits, right? These are the must-haves. Anything else is pretty much aspirational. 30% quality, do you really need it? Not really. This is like an 8% increase, I believe, compared to 20%. If you go through the mods, everything here is T1. Could you do with T2s? Yes, but if you actually watch the video I linked, you're gonna realize that crafting T1s is actually fairly straightforward this league, so I would just go straight for this item. If you really want to play this build and play this build comfortably, having this body armor would be the bare minimum, I would say. That's gonna allow you to run tier 17s, close your eyes, run through tier 17 volatiles, things like that. You probably can't do Voldos and tank quad ghosted shaper slams and all that stuff, but it's gonna let you farm anything in this game, do your uber bosses, very comfortably. I would say this is the entry level requirement here. Coming over to the helmet, same as always, we have a video crafting guide at the top. Just want to quickly say that the video guide is for making the aspirational version of this helmet with mana reservation efficiency. Personally, I don't need to run mana reservation efficiency because of my shield, which I'll show you guys in a second. You can probably go for this version with MRE, but honestly, the version I have with T1 cold resistance is perfectly viable as well, and I actually like this one because it helped me fix my resist a bit. So what is the key focus for your helmet? Obviously you want as high ES as possible, but really you wanted the crafted trigger mod to trigger all the curses, which is going to go into your helmet. In terms of implicit, you should definitely have the physical damage taken as chaos mod here. Because we're a CI, 8% phys converted to chaos damage taken means we just take 8% less physical damage. Aspirational wise, 30% quality, same as always. And I did highlight here the mana reservation efficiency mod is something that's good to have, but you are trading off the T1 resistance mod for it, which means that it will be harder to res cap for this one. Nothing more to be said there. Otherwise, just you have your standard T1 int, T1 ES, bunch of T1 stuff. The higher the ES, the better, obviously. Moving on to shields. Same as always, crafting video, top right. Take a look there if you don't know how to craft this one. The only must-have mod we have is 3% max lightning res. You can see this one here. Again, because we're using this for melding, you need the 3% to hit your 90% max lightning res cap. Aspirational, 30% quality, definitely. The synth implicits, so you add the synth implicits using Harvest Bench after you finish the item, and then you want to roll it with Vivid Vultures, which can be quite expensive, right? So you're not always going to get the 20% increased reservation efficiency. What happens if you don't get it? Well, I have an alternate POE you guys can have a look at if you don't have this one. Or you can do the helmet with the reservation efficiency. Both of them work, right? And you have a lot of options for your synthesis implicits. You can have percentage int, right? That's a good one. And then you can have, any flat intelligence, anything ES related, right? If it's percentage, flat, doesn't really matter. You can have a lot of really good implicits here, so you don't need to say, hey, I definitely need reservation efficiency just because I have it. What I crafted on is double damage, because again, talking about burst windows, this is literally 15% more damage. I think this is the best one by far. You can do a crafted resistance here if you are short on resistances. You can do a crafted dexterity or strength or anything really here. Anything that's to round out your build, right? It doesn't matter. The key thing is to getting as high ES as possible, same as all the gears. We have 500 here, which is a very nice rounded number. Onto the boots. Again, crafting video top right. Take a look if you guys want to know how to craft this one for cheap. For boots, the must-have is over 50% chance to avoid elemental ailments, which we get by doing a Eldritch Implicits, roughly 25% here, and a T1 Essence row, which goes up to like 35% or something. The reason why we only need 50% here is because we get the other 50% to avoid elemental ailments from Ancestral Vision, which is a unique jewel we're going to talk about later on. Aspirational wise, again, you can get 30% quality if you want. You can also get 35% movement speed, which is actually pretty easy. I just settled on 30%, but I do kind of regret it not going for 35%. It's not a big deal, but hey, movement speed feels nice on any build. The last thing to mention here is this 6% action speed. If for some reason you're doing one step ahead, which is a Trickster notable, right, which gives you minimum action speed is set to like 108% or something. If you're doing one step ahead, do not use increased action speed because this becomes a useless mod. Use something else instead, such as Scorched Ground or anything, to be honest. Yeah, just want to highlight that. So now onto the gloves. The gloves is actually a massive source of our attack speed scaling, and then it's quite a big boost to our damage as well. So don't just think of the glove slot as something that's like, purely for defense. Same as always, video guide up top. I will definitely check this one out because it is actually a lot more expensive to craft this one the traditional way, just because of this attack speed and cast speed while focus mod, which is a Dream mod. It's quite hard to get. With veiled orbs at like 15, 16 divines, it's much easier to craft the way I did in the video. What are the must-haves? Well, really just attack speed, to be honest, which is this row right here. So not the Dream mod, but the natural attack speed row. Aspirational, of course, is the Dream mod. It's good, yeah. 50% increase attack speed during like your burst window is gonna make you absolutely shred any bosses you come across. We also use the crafted damage while leeching. As Trickster, you're always leeching energy shields, so again, this is 43% increased damage, which is nice. On the implicits, there's no hard and fast rule about implicits, but I will just say that having tested things, this gain 2 rage on attack hits is probably non-negotiable. Actually, I'm gonna add it to must-haves. It is such a big damage increase on any extended fights, and then you stack these up quite quickly. Now, for the other implicit, which we have lightning exposure on hit, you can also do percentage damage per intelligence. Anything's okay in this. Anything is fine here. Moving on to the amulet. The best in slot is definitely a simplex amulet. This is not cheap. You can see the crafting video here. I think I estimate this around 400 to 500 divines to make this. It's even more expensive if you buy one, I think. What are the must-haves? You should anoint Arcane Focus. And what are the aspirational parts of it? This entire item. All 3 mods, it's pretty much non-negotiable. You just want all of them there. I will say though, this is a tremendous increase in your defense capabilities, but it probably is out of the price range for most people, so I've also prepared a budget version, our good old friend Voice of the Storm. It is much cheaper. You can see that on the right side we have this bit here, which is when I put this item into Path of Building, what do I get? It's fairly consistent damage-wise. You have like a 3 to 4% damage loss, which is not too bad. This is purely because the lucky damage mod is so good. It's like a 17% more damage mod for this alone, right? Non-critical strike is lucky. But you can see that for the defenses of things, we are just so much less tanky compared to having the simplex amulet. Now, people debate with me saying that, hey, this lucky mod is crazy, it's more than a 17% damage increase. Well, that is not how this works, and I can show you guys why. You can skip this bit, it's a bit of math here. Jumping over to paint, we have this little chart here. X will be the first damage row, which you can see rolled 0.5. Y will be a second damage row, which again you can see rolled 0.5. The green shaded region is then the damage increase from, the lucky mod, because you roll the damage twice, you take the higher of the two, right? So this region is where my first row rolled less than 50%, but my second row rolled higher than 50%. So what's the increase or the effectiveness of the lucky mod? It's the area of the green region, which is 0.5 times 1 minus 0.5, which is 0.25. Fairly straightforward. Now, jumping on to the second example, which is the same calculation, but now, instead of rolling 0.5, on my first damage roll, I roll 0.9, right? Therefore, the only benefit I get is that if my second damage roll rolls above 0.9, I get, so that's the blue shaded region. So how much effective damage increase do I get? I get 0.9 times 1 minus 0.9, which is the area of the rectangle there. You get about 9%. For the third example, it's the opposite situation where the first damage roll rolled low, 10%, and therefore the second damage roll, as long as it rolls above 10%, which is this pink shaded region, you're going to have a damage increase. What's the effective damage increase then? You have 0.1 times 1 minus 0.1 for 9% damage increase as well. So if we generalize this, you're going to realize that your effective damage increase is actually represented by this integral, which is just your which is just the rectangle idea that we're talking about here, which is your x times 1 minus x, and you're integrating over 0 to 1. It's fairly straightforward integral. You just solve it, and then you get to half x squared minus a third x cubed, integrating over 0 to 1, which is your damage roll range. It's essentially comes down to half minus a third, which is 1 over 6, and that's the effective damage boost, which is your 16.7%. Or if you don't trust my math here, you can just come over and ask ChatGPT yourself, what is the increase in expected value when comparing two random variables, the first taking the maximum of two uniform distributions over 0, 1, and second one is a single uniform distribution over 0, 1. It's going to give you some mathy stuff, end up on 1 over 6. Yeah. So, which is 16.7%. There you go. Okay, having gone through the gear, let's move over to discussing all the unique and rare druids we run in this build, and we do run quite a few of these. The first one is Ancestral Vision. We use this druid to fix our elemental ailment avoidance. You can see the key mod here, which is that the modifiers to chance to suppress spell, which we have this on 100%, is also applied to the chance to avoid elemental ailments at 50% of their value. So this links in very nicely with our boots, which already has a chance to avoid elemental ailments, so altogether we become elemental ailment immune. This item is non-negotiable, you must have this. Playing this game without elemental ailment avoidance just doesn't feel good. But any implicits really is kind of a luxury. I have 1% chance to penetrate lightning res, but you don't really need this, so just having this item is good enough. Moving on to the second one, Melting of the Flesh. This is another key one. This is what we get to enable the 90% max elemental resistance cap. The key mod here, of course, is that the elemental resistances are capped by your highest maximum elemental resistance cap. Because we stack a lot of maximum lightning resistance and we can get our lightning maximum resistance to 90%, this mod means that our fire and cold will be at 90% as well. The key to this item is to get the max roll for the minus 4% to all maximum elemental resistance. This is what is going to make this item quite expensive. What's good is also to have a good roll on the minus ally resistance roll. I have this on 73%, which is not the best. The best is 70%. So if you have the money, definitely go for a minus 4, minus 70, which is the perfect roll here. Implicit on this item is quite expensive, so I would not really go for that. Light of the Meaning. So this is the druid that's coming back into Ritual, I think. It's quite good. We can slot it right here. I have this little screenshot of the passive tree there, and what it does is that passives in radius also grant 3% additional energy shield. It's actually a very big source of ES, so since we're an energy shield stacking build, this item is quite useful to have. It is a bit expensive though, so any kind of implicits like pen or reservation efficiency is a bit of a luxury, so you don't really need it. Just to be clear, we're putting this druid right here in the passive tree. Watcher's Eye. Watcher's Eye, you have a lot of options for this. There's quite a few good mods, but really the one that you need is max mana as extra ES, and try to get one that's max road, which is 10%. Because we're an int stacking build, we get a lot of max mana, which translates into max ES. It's just a very nice addition on top of everything else. Now the other mods you can get, well, there's plenty of good ones. For Discipline, you have ES regen, ES on hit. For Clarity, you have less mana cost, recover mana when using skill to help with your mana spend. These are all very nice. You can also get some grace or precision mods. I would avoid them just because they're less efficient slot-wise. I think discipline and clarity have better mods overall. But if you have like say attack speed or attack damage for precision, that's fine. Just give up a gem slot to put in precision as well. If you have like chance to evade for grace, that's fine as well. If you're running grace, that is. I personally run haste, so yeah. Speed personalities. This is probably the cheapest of all the jewels I'm showcasing you. You just want two of these. I've got two pictures there for you, and what you want to do is that you want to slot in to the bottom right hand side, so you can see one here and one there. This is the furthest distance from your starting position that you can get. It is really cheap considering the changes to Delhi Mirror Simulacrum this patch. You want 5 int and 5 ES because we're stacking intelligence and energy shield. It's pretty good, just a cheap source of free ES for you. So get this first if you're strapped for budget. This is quite cheap. Forbidden Flash and Flame. This is another one similar to the Watcher's Eye where you have a lot of really good options. I think people tend to run Boring Shadow more than anything. One step ahead is also really good for Voldo farming when you really want to make sure that you don't get your action speed slowed by all the different attacks. Personally, I run Opportunistic. I don't think I have good justifications for why I ran these. When I bought them, they were really cheap, like 10 divines each, and they work for me, so it's also an option. Just make sure you get one of these good ones because the power behind Forbidden Flash and Flame, especially for Trickster nodes, it's so efficient. Trickster is such a strong ascendancy. Being able to take another notable, it's really worthwhile. The 2 jewel slots that you're losing here. Yeah, so any notable is fine. Emperor's Mastery. This is not mandatory. It's really good though. If you look at the mods, you have 7% increased attributes and 5% increased global defenses. If you think back to what we're talking about getting a good corrupt on your Mage Blood, getting a good corrupt on your Nimis ring. If you think back to what we were saying before in the gear section about getting a good intelligence corruption onto your Mage Blood, onto your Nimis, those cost 2 to 3 mirrors, right? This jewel costs like 100 divines. So it is expensive, but for the value it gives, it is still pretty valuable. So yes, Emperor's Mastery is quite expensive at about like 100 divines or something like that, but in terms of value for money, it is still pretty good, but definitely not a must-have. You can use a good red jewel if you want, but looking for late game upgrades, I would definitely look for one of these. And the reason the border is green is because I have a foiled one, but I couldn't find a picture of it, so I just made it green to match the. Yeah, I might cut that bit out. It's not really relevant to the gear section. Lastly, we have the max lightning resistance red jewel. Maybe I should move this up. This is quite important. We need this to hit 90% max elemental resistances. So you can see for both of them, we do have this plus 2% to maximum lightning res. And this is a must-have. You should definitely try to get max energy shield as well. Is it a must-have? Not really, but it's pretty easy to get these 2 mods, so I don't see why you wouldn't do it. Yeah. I guess a trick here before I move on is that you can buy jewels with max cold res, max fire res, or 1% of max cold res or fire res. I think you can use harvest to swap the resistances. For instance, I think for this one, I bought this as plus 1% to maximum fire res. I just swapped fire to lightning, and if you don't get it, if you don't get 2%, that is, you can just swap lightning back to fire, and then back to lightning. Because the roll range is 1 to 2%, right? So eventually you're gonna get 2%. That's probably a good way to make this cheaper, because if you just search for 2% max lightning, it's gonna be quite expensive. Aspirational wise, it's good to have an int roll or strength int. That's pretty nice. Getting the 4th explicit is the expensive bit. I couldn't even afford the attack speed roll. They're like 50 or 100 divines, I don't really see the point of getting such small boosts. But if you want to min-max, you can. And of course, getting useful implicit, that is so expensive. If you have mirrors to spend, go for it. Otherwise, not too big of a deal. Going to the passive tree section, let's start with the cluster jewels that we want to run. So firstly, we want to run at least 2 of these large clusters. You can run 3 of them if you don't have the 35% crafted. What we're really looking for is Feed the Fury. This is damage while leeching as well as attack speed while leeching. It's pretty nice in terms of the damage boost. The second one is Veteran Defender. This one's quite nice as well. It gives us all attributes, elemental resistance while holding shields, as well as increased defense from equipped shield, which synergizes nicely with a very nicely crafted shield like I showed you before. So when you start out, you can run 3 of these or 4 of these if you want, but eventually you want to migrate to at least 2 of these 30% clusters. Now, the cluster jewels are very difficult to craft and they're very boring to craft. You can see that for my 35%, I don't actually have them on all T1s. I think this one is all T2s, and I think this one has some tier 1s and tier 2s. What you're looking for, of course, first of all, the base should be 12% sword attacks or 12% attack with attack damage whilst holding a shield. They're pretty much equivalent. You're looking for the 35% increase effect. It's easiest way is to fracture this mod and then craft the rest on. There's 2 of them. Well, there's 3 of them you can go for. Obviously, Intelligence and Max ES are the 2 mods that you want. For the last mod, it's a bit flex. If you want more damage, you can get skills also grant increased attack speed. I think this goes up to 3%. Or, and I really do recommend this, you should get one of them that has 4% to all elemental resistances. This is really nice quality of life because it's going to help you cap out your resistances quite easily. The last one you want, you can also get all attributes, which is going to help you stack even further and solve your strength needs, but I think it's a bit of an overkill. I think the all resistance is really good, and then the attack speed makes the build feel a bit nicer, but to your own taste. I think we're getting to the part of the build when you're really trying out to fix things that doesn't feel good to you, because everything here is kind of luxury upgrades. By the way, one of these probably crafted like 300 divines, so yeah, it's expensive upgrade. So for me T2s, I just sell for that. I didn't want to, harvest spam these for like 2 hours just to get an upgrade. So yeah, it'd be painful to craft. For the tattoos, we want to replace all the dexterity nodes on the tree. This is why for your mage bluff, your nimis, you kind of want a high dex roll so that you don't create any dexterity deficiencies that you have to fix. The best one is obviously the increased effect of marks. This is going to increase our damage quite a bit, boosting up our sniper's mark. I recommend 10 to 11 of these. The other one that's really good, especially if you're not running Born in the Shadows, is 5% chance to blind enemies with attacks. I run 1 or 2 of these. I run 2, you can just run 1. Yeah, it's just a bit nice. It's a nice defensive layer, right, if you can blind enemies. But obviously, if you can find blinding another source, you just run more of the Thessalia Scouts to boost up your effective marks. Passive 3 pathing, let's head into game for this one. Let's go to our hideout because I think the town with all the people and MTXs might be lagging a little bit. The passive tree is actually fairly straightforward. I'll just show you the final tree I have and maybe explain some of the flex options I think I do when I'm mapping. So going through the kind of ascendancy, we're Trickster, of course. We want to take Polymath, which is simply one of the best ascendancy points. We get more damage, we get a lot of recovery, which makes mapping so much more comfortable. Coming on to the defensive side, we have Escape Artist, of course. This is what enables the crazy energy shield scaling and evasion scaling from our armor and helmet. Must have. Spellbreaker, some people don't take this and they opt for 1 step ahead, which is fair, but then you're playing different type of I think Trickster. For this one, was really hoping for is one, getting spell suppression capped. Two, we prevent more suppressed spell damage, which makes it even tankier to spells. And finally, we have a 50% chance to trigger energy shield recharge, and that is huge because we also, spoilers, come up here and take energy shield recharge is not interrupted by damage if recharge began recently. This means that when we're fighting a boss, if we, start taking spell damage, we're gonna start triggering energy shield recharge, and then it won't stop until we're full. So it's a very, very strong recovery mechanic for our energy shield. And the recovery is boosted even more with Soul Drinker, which is leeching damage as an energy shield. This also gives you more attack and cast speed while leeching, so as you know, we don't have that much attack speed scaling, so this is very nice. And then we also have the Slayer leech effect, so now remove that full life, at full energy shield. This also synergizes very nicely with our gems, which we'll discuss later on, which is your energy leech gem, which I think we get double the effect for that one because of this node. So this is quite good, and I guess one step ahead, something that is worth mentioning, because when you're doing Voldos, you actually get action speed slowed or reduced quite a bit. And I think if you're doing Ghost of Voldos, the bosses have crazy action speed as well. So this one capping their action speed whilst putting a minimum floor on hours is just simply invaluable to have. I think this 108% of base value might turn out to be like 50% more damage or 100% more damage. I don't quite know that well. But you don't really have to take this. You can just use your Forbidden Flame and Forbidden Flash for this. So yeah, it's definitely one that's really nice, and you should keep in the back of your mind if you're doing a lot of Voldos content. In terms of pathing, maybe let's go through the top region first and then go down to the bottom. We come up here, grabbing the int nodes, and we get to this region. ES evasion, so Thief is quite nice, and this whole region we actually is quite point efficient because we're putting our Light of the Meaning Jewel here. So every small point here you can see gives us 3% max energy shield, which is quite nice. We are taking the 1% increase evasion per 5 intelligence. This is a crazy mastery actually. This is what enables us to almost evasion cap without grace. Right, you can see that my evasion is something, well, 82%, maybe not quite evasion cap, but you can get this up to like, effectively up to like close to 90%. The cap is 95%. You can get this quite close to 90% with your Enfeeble Curse as well as Blind and all that stuff. So 82% hideout is pretty good without grace. Ghost Dance is a no-brainer. We are stacking evasion and energy shields, so this is yet another form of recovery. Coming up here, we do take these two nodes just to be able to get 100% increased energy shield from Helmet. Our Helmet has 560 energy shield, so that's quite efficient, boosting that one up a little bit more. Chaos Inoculation is a must-have. And then we come over here, we take one cluster jewel on top. Keep moving along. As an int stacker, we definitely want to take the utmost intellect part of the tree. You can do a couple of things here. I think 5 intelligence per allocate is still more efficient. Let's have a look here. I haven't tested this in a while. Yeah, it's still more efficient. So grab your +5 intelligence per allocated mastery. If you're a bit short on strength or dexterity, don't be scared of taking that temporarily as well until you can get better gear. Wicked Word, we've mentioned already. This is crazily good and synergizes so well with our Spellbreaker. I think this is one of the things GG might look to nerf next league. Arcane Focus, we get this on Anoint. It's just so efficient with how much energy shield we get, faster recharge, as well as spell intelligence. Pick up a Jewel Socket here to be efficient, pathing right along. So we take this wheel just because it has 1% maximum lightning res, and also we get this crazy note here, which is 10% less physical damage taken whilst on full energy shield. Now, this is not up all the time, especially if you get hit once. Maybe you take some chip damage and then you get below the threshold for full energy shield, so it's not up all the time, but it's up most of the time, given the way we recover and the way we overleech. And then finally we come over here to take one last cluster jewel right here. Some people like to take Zealot Oath, which is good. The regen becomes quite significant when you have like 27,000 energy shield. For me though, I think a more efficient way is to find a Watcher's Eye that regenerate energy shield whilst affected by disciplines. You're getting something similar and you save 2 points. So it's a bit of a min-maxing for late game there. So since we diverge from this point, let's go down a little bit. We take a power charge here so we can have +1 curse with our anathema ring to enable the quad curse setup. If you only want to run tri-curse, you can skip this, but the curse is quite valuable in my opinion, so I don't think you should. Some people like to take frenzy charges. I don't run any frenzy charges when I'm mapping because of the Eater of the World altars can sometimes ruin your build if you have frenzy charges, but yeah, you can for 2 points. It could be efficient, but for me, I would prefer to have more intelligence or pick up more points on my 35% cluster here. Mark the Prey is simply a good mark node here, and I have here that marked enemy cannot deal critical strikes. You can do a few of these. I think cannot regen life is also really good if you're doing Vodos or if you have any content where Maven just heals them a bunch. Chance to get Frenzy, I haven't ticked that because I'll explain in a little bit. I take that node later on. It's not ticked at the moment, but it's one of those flexible things I do. Depends on the map mods that I'm running. This Leech Mastery is goated. 10% Leech is instant, is humongous for the sustain of both mana and energy shield. And yeah, it's just crazily good. Coming down here, I take the multi-shot mastery. So this is the Flasks I was talking about. The only reason we take this, well, I mean, fire additional projectile is good, but we kind of like, it only affects the number of splits, I believe, and we already split like 10 times, something like that. So what we're looking for here is monsters cannot block your attacks, because in tier 17 there is a map node that says monsters can block your attacks, which is not fun at all. So this is one of the annoying bits of doing tier 17 maps. If I roll the map mod that has, you know, monster can block your attacks, I would manually take this mastery here just to be able to get around that. When I don't have that mod, however, what I do is I come in and pick up this Mark Mastery, which has more mark effect scaling, and then I do Game Frenzy Charge, I think. The extra point I just put in anywhere for my 35% clusters. Inveterate is how we're going to cap our spell suppress, as well as increase the amount of suppressed spell damage, and we're going to further that with the mastery as well. So this synergizes very well with, again, Spellbreaker. The idea is that because spell suppression only prevents 50% of damage, if you can increase the amount of damage it prevents, spell suppression gets exponentially more powerful. So yeah, it's quite a good node. Taking this jewel node here for another jewel socket. Jewels are very useful for this build, and there's so many good ones. So I try to take them as many. I try to take as many of them as I can. Coming down here, a lot of pathing. We've explained the Expert Hunter Mastery already, so I won't go into too much into it. Precise Technique. This is the whole reason why we're okay with Resolute Technique. Pretty much that. We have 1 life, so our accuracy is always higher. We don't crit, which is fine because we have Resolute Technique anyways. Wisdom of the Glade. It's pretty efficient for 30 intelligence. I think it's good. You can also take beef if you're really short on strength, but you know, you don't have to. For this one, this is a new lead of the pack. I think it's new this patch. It's such an efficient and well located spot for us, so we take this instead. You don't really need this reservation mastery, so but if you have the extra, like, you know, node, or if you have the extra skill point, why not? It's a good solid amount of increased damage. And then finally come down here to take the last cluster jewel. So what other changes would I make to the tree? Well, I think when you're running maps, some of them cannot suppress spell damage. For those ones, I tend to unspec a point and place it in acrobatics. You're not gonna get 75% spell dodge, but you get 50%. That is better than kind of not suppress any spells, which makes you quite a bit squishier. Don't worry about the elemental avoidance. You're still able to 100% avoid elemental ailments, even though you're converting your spell suppress to spell dodge. Um, Anything else I forgot to mention? Not really. Split personalities, you want them here. I think this is the farthest distance from the starting point. Um, yes. So you might be thinking, what happens if I don't have the shield um, implicits, which is what I have here. 20% reservation efficiency. Well, there's a couple of things you can do. One, you can get mana reservation efficiency on your helmet with the way I crafted in the videos. Or you can come in here and pick up this Deep Thoughts, which is actually fairly efficient from a intelligence perspective. It's 20 intelligence, but you're gonna have to give something up. I tend to just give up the nodes I have on my 35% clusters, as well as the 30 intelligence node I just hunted there, and then you want to take the 12% increased mana reservation of skills. Yeah, to get you a little bit more comfortable for your mana costs. But you don't have to. You can just, run one aura less. Yeah, it's you're min maxing not so much for the best DPS. I think you should min max for the best quality of life or the best, I guess, performance for the content you're trying to farm. If you're doing bosses, if you're doing altar farming, if you're doing Tier 17 Rogue Exiles, Tier 17 box farming, they all require a little bit of tweaks to the tree. Especially say you're doing Voldos, your tree will change from map to map, depends on the map mod. So just be flexible and really be familiar with which nodes are the important ones, which ones are not so important. And after a few tries, you're gonna figure it out. Or you can ask me or anyone. I think people are pretty helpful. There's a lot of people playing this build, this league, so yeah. And these are the tattoos I was talking about. Tesalio Scout, 4% increased effective marks, which just kind of like saturates the entire tree. Well, there you go. Let me know if you have any questions. I know there's different variants. Some people come in here, go through this way, and then grab Charisma. Some people like to take Throw of the Battle. I I think when you get to the int stacking stage, especially when you have your 35% clusters, hopefully they're better than the ones that I've crafted. These points are just not as efficient at taking more points in the 35% cluster, to be honest. Yeah, the end game is having a full T1 35% cluster and take all the nodes in it. So okay, moving on to Flasks. Flasks is going to be a quick section to go through, but there's some interesting things I do want to discuss. The first one is Prismatic Tincture. It's an absolutely crazy flask. Well, it's not a flask, it's a tincture, but you know what I mean. You see a boss, you press this tincture, and the boss just dies. It's that easy. You want one that's prismatic because you want the increased elemental damage with melee weapons. You also want melee damage penetrates 27% elemental resistance, simply the best one. The effect is flexible. You can also use the one that's increased effect and more mana burn, so it's a little less comfortable to use, but it gives you more burst DPS. It's up to you which one you use. You can comfortably keep that one up with how much we're leeching for quite a while, so yeah, yeah, it's up to you. I think that one's better. I rolled this one myself, and I just didn't see the need to drop like 5 divines to buy a perfectly rolled. For quartz flasks, so for the other magic flasks, you are looking for the classic mage blood package. And your suffixes, you need to have these three. It doesn't matter which one they go on, but you need reduce curse effect, you need avoid stun, and you need elemental resist enduring effect. So as long as you have these three on your mage blood flasks, you're fine. It doesn't really matter what goes on what, right? So quartz flask is actually very key. It's also the one that people tend to miss out on. So the non-melding variant of this build, which in my opinion is quite a bit less powerful, you run triple elemental resistance flasks. then you've got to give up Quicksilver, you've got to give up, like your Silver Flask for Onslaught, and you might have to give up your Quartz Flask. You really should not give up Quartz Flask, and the reason is because not only does it give you a crazy amount of spell suppression, it also gives you phasing, right? For Splitting Steel, the whole point is you're trying to stand right on top of the boss so that all your projectiles will, when they return, will shotgun. Phasing lets you do that so much easier than if you don't have it. Quartz Flask is non-negotiable for me. You should always try to run this one. Topaz Flask. Yeah, you just need to run it. We are stacking Melding. We're stacking maximum lightning resistance specifically. So yeah, we need this flask to cap. This version I'm running, I have one that makes me immune to bleed and corrupted blood because I don't have them on my jewels. You can probably get CB immunity with a implicit corruption, but these are quite expensive. So I just swap this in when I'm doing bosses like Sirius that requires corrupted blood immunity. To be honest, when you have like 20k ES, corrupted blood doesn't hurt that much unless you're doing like some crazy uber bosses or ghosted stuff. So Bismuth Flask. We actually unfortunately need Bismuth Flask to cap our resistances. Yeah, that's just it's just how it is with melding, and the fact that we spent all of the explicit modifiers on our rare gear to go for damage and, intelligence. So something has to make up for the resistances, and that's the Bismuth Flask. The last flask slot is quite flexible and tends to run Quicksilver, Silver, or Gold, depends on what I'm running. I just run Quicksilver, to be honest. Running fast is just, it feels too good. Quicksilver, I would say, is for general use. Definitely swap in a Silver Flask for bossing content. The amount of damage increase from Silver Flask is quite nice. For Gold, if you're farming for Gold for your Settler of Calga, or you're farming, or if you want rarity for your Rogue Exiles farm, maybe I'll put it in, but I think it's more efficient if you just run faster with a Quicksilver. Okay, Gems. Gems is another easy one. If you play this build for any period of time, you should know what is coming at you. I don't think I have too much customization here. The main link being obviously Splitting Steel, and the gems are pretty optimized. They're pretty set in stone. There's no kind of like, hey, this one might be better, try to use this one, etc. Volatility, ally damage with attacks, lightning pen, energy shield leech, none of them is debatable. I think they're all kind of like best at what they do. Energy leech is especially nice because if I show you what it actually does in game, it's 15% more damage while on full energy shield. We're almost always on full energy shield, and 25% more damage whilst leeching. We're almost always leeching. So that is a 40% more damage in a single support, which is quite nice. It's similar to like an awakened elemental damage attacks level 6, right? So this is a crazy support there. Damage on full life, sorry, is the only one I would ever consider swapping, and the only thing I would swap it for would be Awakened Fork for mapping. So I actually didn't know about this for like the longest time. I wanted to use Pierce, which felt miserable. Awakened Fork just makes your killer so much better. Not quite at Lightning Strike level, but it's bearable. You actually feel like you're playing a spell with some coverage rather than a spell that has zero coverage. So yeah, I would really urge you to try Awakened Fork if you haven't tried that before. The curse setup is, there's some flexibility but not too much. Conductivity and ally weakness, I think you should always run this. Enfeeble, I also think you should always run Enfeeble. Some people swap it for punishment, which is fine if you're going for like, pure DPS, I guess. Punishment is nice, but I think if you're doing any kind of mapping content, the safety provided by Enfeeble, whether you're doing Voldos with Quad Ghosted Feared, or if you're farming Rogue Exiles, just kind of like the reduction in damage, the The less accuracy. I think it's just nicer. It just feels more comfortable, anyways, for me. So Enfeeble is pretty good normally. My last link is Inspiration because I probably reserve too much of my mana. If you don't reserve as much, you can put it in Power, right? So if you put in Power and you still have enough mana to use all of your curses, then definitely do that because it actually buffs up the power of the curses quite a bit. Again, the quad curse up is absolutely crazy. Just with conductivity and element weakness alone, this is like times 2 damage, right? The amount of penetration you get is absolutely crazy. So it synergizes so well with Anathemas. There's like no investment for having so many curses, or well, very little investment involved in having this many curses. It is simply too good not to run. Sniper's Mark. This used to be a lot more powerful when I used to play this build because the number of projectiles actually scales. Now it's fixed at 2, I think, or is it 3? I can't remember. But yeah, still the best one because it lets you split more, which all can return, and then shotgun. Sniper's Mark, enhanced mark on hit. No kind of like, you know, alternatives there. These are so efficient. Put them into your weapon or shield, and you're gonna have a good time with this one. For auras, it's quite flexible, but I would recommend you to focus on the defensive side of things. Just because there's no great offensive auras besides haste, right? So wrath and all that stuff, you don't really need it. I think haste is probably one of the best ones for both offense and to just feel good, so always tend to run it. You can replace haste with grace if you want to be more defensive, but let's be honest, you're so tanky anyways, you probably don't need this. You can also replace this with purity of elements. Yeah, please don't do that. Yeah, that's sad if you have to use purity of elements in this build. There's other ways of fixing your resistances and getting elemental avoidance. Yeah, just I'm gonna cross this out. If you watch my build guide, you should know better than using purity of elements. Discipline, Enlighten, these all get stuck into my shield because my shield has a good implicit. If you don't have the implicit on your shield, this can go wherever, doesn't really matter. Enlighten 4 is really good though. Enlighten 5 is obviously better, but that's like a couple mirrors, so probably not worth it. The other ones we run is Flash and Stone. Flash and Stone got buffed this time around, so if you're keeping Sand Stand, it's quite a nice damage reduction boost. Arctic Armor is actually great for our build because we are lacking in physical damage avoidance, and when we're fighting bosses, we're standing still on top of them, which activates Arctic Armor automatically. Clarity is purely to enable Watcher's Eyes. We don't really need this any more than level 1. Another Enlighten 4 to make sure we have mana to cast off our curses. You can probably replace Flash and Stone for something else. Don't have really anything great in mind, but you can if you want to. Or you can just not run it, right? If you want to be more comfortable, if you don't want to invest a bit more into kind of like having more mana reservation, or if you don't want to buy Enlighten Force, you can just drop this aura altogether. It's a bit conditional anyways. If someone hits you from outside the range, you don't get the damage reduction, so yeah. The last part of gems are flex slots. You can mix and match whatever you want. Movement skills, I definitely recommend having at least one. God skills are pretty nice as well. War Cry, I think it's Enduring Cry. So the ones I tend to run are Shield Charge Faster attacks. It's a staple. I normally combo that with either Flame Dash or Frostblink, just so I can get over walls. If I'm running map with walls or ledges, I really don't like having to walk up walls. Cast and damage taken and Immortal Core, again, I think that's the best guard skill setup. You can also ignore the cast and damage taken and just press Immortal Core when you're in danger. But that's a bit of a god gamer move, and I am very slow on reaction speeds, so I just cast my damage taken it. You probably don't have enough strength to level this up to level 20, by the way, just as high level as you can. Enduring Cry Urgent Orders is actually quite good to generate endurance charges if your content calls for it. Yeah, it's just one more button to press, so there's other ways of generating endurance charges, and quite frankly, yeah, you can invest in them, such as maybe with the small cluster jewel and I think there's a couple ways, but yeah, if you're mapping, you don't want endurance charges because the Eat of World Altars will mess it up. Um, if you're doing bosses, this is a very efficient setup. With two sockets, you cast pretty fast, and you can keep it up 100% of the time. So yeah, to your again, you can decide what you want to do depending on the content you're farming. The build is honestly so tanky that unless you're trying to do Voldo quad feared or you want to tank for some reason, the Maven memory game, I don't think you need endurance charges. Okay, on to final tips. The busy slide. Um, let's just go through one by one. So suppression cap, resistance cap, and physical damage mitigation are some of the things I have to solve along the way. So I thought I might just lay them out here for everyone to see because you might not have the gear level that I have, so you're gonna have to go for like alternate options, which is obviously not ideal. So for suppression cap, we have 20% from Spellbreaker, 39% for the Inveterate Wheel, 19% from Quartz Flasks, and 22%, that's the max roll from our body armor. This gives you exactly 100%, right? This is why when we're talking about body armor, I said we need the max roll of 22%. If you find the body armor that's selling for a fractured 21%, yeah, you're gonna have to make up that actual 1% from somewhere else because we must be 100% capped since we rely on spell suppression to also become fully ailment avoidant, right, with Ancestral Vision. So if you're not 100% capped, what do? Resourcefulness. This is quite a good one. If I jump in game here, it is just 2 nodes down. And these are not even bad nodes, right? So this one has, well, energy shield per enemy killed, which is not great, but because it's in range of my Light of Meaning, gives me 3% max energy shield. And this node is actually very nice because it gives you 13% energy shield as well as 8% suppress. So resourcefulness, pretty good 2 point investment. I would recommend you guys consider it. Watcher's Eye mod, so you can. This is a Grace Watcher's Eye mod, so that means you have to run Grace, but I think it goes up to 14%, so yeah, it's not bad. Entrench, I ran this for like 3 days, but I just hated how point inefficient it is. So we do path right by it. This is Entrench. The only annoying thing is that we path through on the top side and on the bottom side. If we path through on the bottom side, we can just take 2 points, right, and get 17%, which is fantastic. But here, each point is like 5, and then you don't really need the life recovery from Flasks, so it's a bit of a wasted node there. If you're really desperate, take 1 or 2, I guess, but otherwise I wouldn't do anything there. Okay, suppression cap, very important. Resistance cap, this is a hard one. To solve this, for the longest time, I just ran T1 resistance mods on gear, right? And what I mean by that, if we jump back into game again, oh, that's not the game, that's my pub. If we just jump back into game again, right? So, my gloves doesn't have any resistance mods on it. Do I really need the attack and cast speed while focused? Probably not. I could take 48% of increased cold rest. My helmet already has 48% cold rest, well 47%. My shield, do I need 15% chance to deal double damage? No, I can probably craft some resistance on it as well. My mage block could be rolled a bit better. My boots could have, well, you know, it has a resistance mod on it, so. And if it's really bad, you can take off the 6% increased attribute suffix on your chest and craft resistance on it. So fixing on your gear is probably the cheapest way to do it. It also, by the way, makes all the gear I mentioned above so much easier to craft because you don't have to, move a June mod or move an Essence mod. So yeah, I think this is the most preferred alternative there. You can also do the resistance mods on rare jewels. So the 2 rare jewels that we do have, which has +2 maximum lightning res on it, Instead of running intelligence on them, just run like fire, cold, and lightning, whatever you need, right? But the best way to do it is a 35% cluster drew with the all res mod. So this is what you are. So this is what you're looking for, right? 35% increase effect, and then you can roll up to 4% all elemental resistances, which gets boosted up to 5% for the node that you take. Um, if you take all of these nodes, that's 50% to all resistances. Pretty good. That's gonna solve your resistance in no time. You can see that I am way overcapped. I am overcapped, especially for the Eater of the World altars, so I can run those comfortably. Oh, I lost all the. Okay, that's fine. So yeah, that's the best way. You obviously have to run a Bismuth Flask as well as a fast suffix for all res. You can't get away from it. It's just the trade-off you want for melting. And as a final last resort, you can run Purity of Lightning, but please don't do this. It's you spend like a Mage Blood and Nimis plus like a mirror on your gear, and you run Purity of Elements. That's kind of shameful. So don't do this if you can help it. The last one is Fizz Mitigation. There's not too much to do here. It's more kind of like a note that if you play this build last league, you would have a lot of kind of like conversions. Physical damage converted to elemental, and then your physical damage mitigation will be quite good. I think for all builds this time around, maybe except for your endurance charge stackers, physical damage is actually something you have to solve. We have a couple of sources. They're not fantastic, so physical mid is still kind of like the hardest thing on this build to get. So we do have 8% fizz damage taken as chaos on helmet. You can do your chest for another 12%. In fact, you should probably do it unless you're very end game, have the Simplex amulet, is in stacking like crazy. Otherwise, this 12% fizz as chaos is always better. Arctic armor, when standing still, you get like 21%, which is very nice because we're always standing still when we're firing. We don't want to move. This synergizes well with Surf Tokuhama, which is 9% when standing still, so it's like 30%. It's quite nice. Soul of Solaris also gives you 6% if you're fighting a single boss. It happens sometimes, but I don't know. Sometimes it doesn't, so it's not very reliable. But yeah, just be on the lookout for physical damage. When you are doing your POBs, check how much physical max hit you have against different bosses' abilities, I think. Is that what I would do? If you can tank Uber Shaper Slam, you're probably fine for everything in the game. Actually, Uber Shaper Slam probably overkill. The truth of the matter is that there's so little large physical damage hits outside of bosses or ghosted rogue exiles. You have to be farming specific content to really have to worry about it. And if you're farming those content already, I think you should definitely invest the time to kind of like double check how you're dealing with your physical damages and make sure that you are fully covered on this front. Because I see so many profiles running around with like a million max hit for your fire, cold, and lightning, and then they're 50k fizz max hit, which is pretty good. Don't get me wrong, 50k is pretty good, but it's like the disparity just kind of makes you laugh. It's like elemental damage you can tank for the eternity, but any kind of physical damage you know, just kind of die to the random slams from a rogue exile. You're kind of like, did I really spend 2 mirrors on this build only to die to a rogue exile? Kind of thing. Okay, that's it. Thank you for watching. I think this is gonna be a very long video. Um, yeah, people don't really watch my videos through its entirety. I tend to yap on quite a bit, but I feel like for this one, I really try to pack as much information and the things I've learned making this build into it. So hopefully it helps you guys. It's quite late in the league, and I don't know. With Gauntlet coming out tomorrow, I'm gonna be playing the Gauntlet for a bit. I think, see how it go. I don't know if you guys will find this useful, but seriously, having played some crazy builds in the past, this is one of the best builds I've ever played, and I can guarantee you this build will not survive till next league. GGG is not going to let Trickster go on in its current state. And it's quite a good league, it's quite a fun league, so if you have it in you to make one more character, play Trickster, Splitting Steel, Lightning Strike, Flicker Strike, whatever. But this archetype, it's so strong, it is so satisfying when you get all the gears going. Yeah, it's kind of just like unparalleled power, right? Well, that's it. Enough yapping. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. A lot of you guys watch my videos and don't subscribe. I'm really trying to grow my subscription numbers so I can get monetized. Yeah, that's a goal of mine when I start making these videos to reach 1,000 subscribers. I think we're a little bit more than halfway there. So thanks for the support. And if you enjoyed it, maybe check out some of my other videos, see if they help you. Yeah, and good luck in your crafting journeys, as well as if you're playing Gauntlet, maybe I'll see your name when you die tomorrow, if you can get on the leaderboards. That should be a fun experience for everyone. That's it. Bye bye. I'll see you guys next time.